From 1800 to present time, much of the Houma Nation has made roots in Terrebonne and Lafourche parishes. However, issues with the denial of education and environmental disasters have caused movement throughout the years to St. Mary Parish, Jefferson Parish, Plaquemines, and St. Bernard parishes. The tribe has contributed to the commerce in the area by teaching early settlers the skills to survive off the land. Due to the forced migration of the Houma people, the tribe actually ended up with an advantage living next to waterways that lead directly to the Gulf, which in turn created direct access to areas where fishing, shrimping, and trapping were plentiful.
Well, you have to think, as far as shaping Terrebonne Parish, we were here when the Acadians came down. We were the first people of this area. We migrated south to an area in a sense that nobody wanted to come to, but it was our paradise because, we became a coastal people. And if you think about Thanksgiving, you hear about the Indians up north meeting the European people. Well, we did the same thing down here. We showed the Cajun people, the Acadian people, how to survive off of this land that was really, in a sense, different from their homelands. We had to, share. And, we've always been a people that have always been pretty friendly and sharing our knowledge. And so we shared, our way of life with the other people that came in as they would arrive here.
The waterways have given Terrebonne Parish its shape, but agriculture has provided the names of the places we know. Many of our current streets and neighborhoods are named for long-forgotten plantations and plantation owners. These include neighborhoods such as Evergreen, Myrtle Grove, Roberta Grove, Mandalay, Waterproof, Ellendale, and Mulberry, and streets such as Barrow, Belanger, and Senac.
Go back 200 plus years ago, a little before Terrebonne was really settled, and a man named Etienne de Boré, he actually invented the process of crystallization of sugar in what is now Audubon Park. Yeah, and that was where the sugar industry started in Louisiana. Now it's one of the biggest industries worldwide. And so sugarcane became a cash crop for the area where people could get actual money for their product instead of just eating it.
After the Civil War and the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, African Americans continued to be vital to the industry. Many continued to work on the plantations and were paid with plantation-specific tokens that could only be used at the plantation general store.
The 1860 census said there was about almost 7,000 slaves in 1860. So clearly we moved from that, as Alvin referenced, from the plantation into the community in general, and took whatever jobs were available, but we worked hard and contributed to those owners' well-being and growth. And look at us today.
Lee Yun of Canton, China, introduced the art of drying shrimp to Terrebonne Parish, offering a means of preservation prior to manufactured ice. Many know this early practice today as dancing the shrimp. While primitive, this method allowed Terrebonne to begin to tap into one of our most plentiful and sustainable industries still today.
Terrebonne Parish is abundant in natural resources, and we're close to the Gulf of Mexico and the Mississippi River. And so many, many years ago, people were migrating here for the natural resources, the lumber, the trapping, the fishing industry and such like that. And it just happened to be one of the most blessed places in the world that provides everything that somebody would need to be a fisherman.
Prior to about 1880, timber production in Louisiana was fairly small, meeting the local needs. Mills and logging were confined largely to areas along waterways. By contrast, the so-called second phase of lumbering, the industrial phase, was huge in its output. In 1880, Louisiana ranked 13th in the United States for the dollar value of its timber. By 1900, it ranked 10th in the nation, and by 1920, second. In the early 1910, the state led the country in timber production. In 1910, Dilbert, Stark, and Brown Cypress Company established a sawmill in a small swamp town called Donner, Louisiana. They operated 2.5 miles of railroad using 60-pound rails with 2 locomotives, 26 logging cars, and 1 log loader. Donner, once a swamp, was drained by the sawmill company, becoming the metropolis of the northern part of Terrebonne Parish.
Louisiana officials chose to develop a market for muskrat fur and protect its supply through management laws. The state sought the cooperation of trappers to maintain global demand, but when Edward Avery McHenry released nutria alongside the muskrat, the ecological balance of the marsh was permanently altered. Businesses in the seafood industry paired fur trading with seafood sales as a way to make a living. Bloom and Bergeron Seafood Company of Terrebonne Parish is a perfect example. With the increase in demand for dried shrimp, fur trading at Bloom and Bergeron slowly began to dissipate. Muskrats shrank into obscurity, and trappers struggled to embrace the nutria as a substitute. The Louisiana muskrat industry, starting with its rise in the 1890s, continuing through its years as a leading fur bearer, and ending with its replacement by the nutria in the 1960s.
Basically, when it started, it was a barter type of thing. My grandfather started, he was selling dry goods and whatever out of a buggy, in the Terrebonne Parish. He was working out of New Orleans. And he was coming here, people were building stores and dry good places, but they didn't have any money, and it was that barter which helped promote that industry. So as the industry started growing, he would sell dry goods to these people, and they would have other foods to eat besides what they produced here. And he would take the dried shrimp, they had dried shrimp to barter with him, and he would take it and trade it in the French market. So he decided, well, heck, that industry, he was making enough money in it, so he decided to just go into the dried shrimp industry.
In the early 1900s, mosaic disease wiped out more than half of the sugar production in the parish. Southdown Plantation, with the help of the USDA and LSU Agriculture Center, is accredited with saving the Louisiana sugarcane industry from extinction by providing cane that was resilient to the disease. Research innovations in the industry continue today at the Sugar Research Center that is still located on property that was once Southdown Plantation.
Because of a mosaic disease that hit the sugar industry, it decimated the industry. It brought it down, I don't know how much, but I'm saying less than half of the production because of this one disease called mosaic. Well, the Sugar League was formed back then, and they were able to get rid of this disease through breeding, plant breeding. And the facility we have here in Houma started it.
The first discovery of oil and gas in Terrebonne Parish dates back to the early 1900s. In 1904, the Pickard and Hayward brothers discovered an oil field on the Leo Lorette farm. Shortly after, in 1909, the Bush Petroleum Company discovered another field near Montague, which later became known as the Magenta Well. It wasn't until some 20 years later that the Texas Company, which most of us now know as Texaco, signed a land lease with the Louisiana Land and Exploration Company and began mobilizing equipment to drill for oil and gas.
When the first oil well was drilled, I'm just thinking, first oil well was drilled in Louisiana in 1901 in Jennings, Louisiana. That's where kind of the oil and gas industry started out in Louisiana. And then you fast forward a little bit, you go back into I think it's 1940 when they drilled the first. Of course, they had drilled some land wells already before that, but in 1940 they drilled, I think, the first offshore well. It progressed from there, and I mean, there was so much happening in the oil and gas industry fairly quick, with the oil deposits. You started drilling for oil and gas, and and this is where we are today.
In 1943, the World War II Naval Land Installation was established at the Houma Airport. It served as a blimp hangar and conducted surveillance of German U-boat activity in the Gulf of Mexico. After the war ended, the federal government transferred the Naval Land Installation to the local government by way of a quit-claim deed. The property, now called the Houma Terrebonne Airport and Industrial Park, is leased to the general aviation and industrial tenants.
In the 1930s, many Terrebonne Parish workers gave up farming, fishing, and logging and shifted their focus to support the needs of oil and gas companies. Such services included land surveying, lease negotiation, equipment manufacturing, piloting, and catering services, to name a few. In the 1940s and 50s, Texaco remained Houma's largest employer. Lake Pelto became the mecca of oil and gas production, and many new companies began to mobilize their operations in Terrebonne Parish. Given oil discoveries were starting to be made further out in deeper waters, civic and business leaders pushed for the dredging and completion of the Houma Navigational Canal, which allowed for better access to the Gulf of Mexico. As a result, many offshore exploration companies and related service providers set up shop in Houma, and the population expanded exponentially.
In 1946, Terrebonne Parish grew rapidly and exceeded the bed capacity of the hospital. Therefore, the need for more services was on the mind of the Terrebonne Parish Police Jury. In 1950, Tulane graduate students were hired by the Houma Terrebonne Chamber of Commerce to conduct a public opinion poll, asking the question, what are the greatest needs of the city of Houma and the civil parish of Terrebonne? The message was loud and clear, a hospital. So in 1950, upon the recommendation of the medical community and facts presented by Tulane graduate students, the police jury authorized the construction of Terrebonne General Hospital.
Doctors have always been here, and it's always been a big part of the parish, taking care of them. And certainly, if you look at the growth of hospitals, we had only one hospital when I came, and now there are 2 big hospitals which have every facility known to medicine. I think that it tells you the importance of medical practice and medical care in our community. I got my daddy's charge cards, and he would pick them up, and when he first started practicing back in the 30s, it was like 25 cents, 50 cents for an office visit, or ice chest of shrimp, or a couple of crabs, or whatever. And then we kind of progressed, and he kind of increased in his costs. When I came to Houma, an office visit was $5. And when we delivered a baby, I would take care of the mother for the entire 9 months. We'd see her every month, and then every week in the last week, and if she'd have a boy, we'd take care of the baby in the nursery and do the circumcision. The entire price of that from day 1 till delivery and circumcision was $125. And we did that for a long time before third-party pay came in, and certainly we increased that. But I don't think we ever got much higher until we stopped delivering babies, much higher than $300 or $400 for a delivery. So prices have really changed. I'm so all the women know that they don't pay $125 or $300. The hospital bills were very cheap back then, and when you had a baby or you were in the hospital, you could stay in the hospital as long as you want. They didn't tell you had to be out in 24 hours. Yeah. So if you wanted to have your baby stay in the nursery for 4 or 5 days and you wanted to recuperate, you could stay 4 or 5 days. We used to be able to admit a patient to the hospital for a complete diagnostic workup. Put them in on a Monday, they'd have a barometer up, a GI, x-rays, gallbladders, all that stuff done, be finished by Tuesday, and they'd go home, but everything was done in the hospital. Can't do that anymore. The insurance companies put great restrictions on what we can and cannot do.
In 1960, the combination of rich oil production, backed by Houma's productive seafood waters, fertile soil, and natural mineral resources makes Houma one of the fastest growing cities in America. In 1961, the Houma Navigational Canal was completed, providing a 30-mile link from the Intercoastal Canal to Terrebonne Bay and the Gulf of Mexico.
With the oil deposits, it created a lot of jobs, created a lot of companies to come in to service those jobs. A lot of people moved in. It created a lot of construction in homes, and the banking industry took off. Medical was already here, but that's pretty much how it shaped with the oil and gas deposits that they had on land and offshore. That's where it all started.
The population has exploded in Terrebonne Parish, and it's because the living conditions are good, and they've always had some work to do, and it's been in the oil and gas business, no doubt about it. The largest industrial subdivision in the state of Louisiana. We had 10,000 acres of land that Jim Walter, who owned the Jim Walter Corporation, who owned South Coast Corporation, who is the people that are buying Wallace's sugar. And so we started transferring sugarcane land into industrial subdivision. And we, as a test project, we developed about 150 acres over on By the Large, and that sold before we ever got it ready to sell, to tell you the truth. So we decided we would switch over to Grand Kaya, and because it had railroad available, and we thought that would be a really great asset. Turned out to be nobody ever used it. But we cut the cypress swamp and we dug a slip, which was 1 mile long and 300 feet wide, as big as the Houma Navigation Canal. And we filled up about 400 acres of property and made it to where you could eventually walk on it. And we sold that property to basically oil field, big oil field.
The 1980s proved to be much more challenging for those employed in oil and gas. The price of oil went from $30 a barrel in 1985 to $10 a barrel in 1986. Unemployment rose to 25% and the local economy crashed. Bank foreclosures rose with real estate prices having crashed. It wasn't until the early 1990s that Houma Terrebonne saw a rebound in the oil economy.
In 1979, 80, 81, that's when the industry started going down. And at that time, we had probably about 75, 80 employees. And by 1983, you know, when things change like that in the economy, and you just gotta adjust yourself to the level of business you have. So we dropped from 75 employees just roughly to probably 18 employees. And those 18 employees were working 7 and 7. So it was a tough, challenging time, but you know, you just have to work through it and get down to the level of what the business is at the time, and that's what it was in our particular business. It was 100% oil and gas.
While Houma is only an hour drive away from one of the world's top tourist destinations, New Orleans, the unique culture and landscape wouldn't come into popularity until the 1980s. After a much-needed boost of capital to the tourism advertising budget and increased access to the area, the parish rose to the top 25% in tourism revenue and remains there. In 1980, we see the beginning of what would become a larger industry in swamp tours with the start of Annie Miller's Swamp and Marsh Tours, created because of the downturn in the oil field industry. The tour's popularity spread not just throughout Louisiana, but also the entire country and overseas, being featured in national and European publications. During the same period, the area's access to rich offshore fishing gained fans with record number of visitors brought in for charter boats and guided trips. The oil platforms create a unique environment that attracts anglers from all over the world, with higher numbers of non-resident fishing licenses sold than any other parish, and frequently the most registered boats.
Well, tourism in Terrebonne Parish, we have different aspects. You know, it comes from our fishing, our Mardi Gras, culture, heritage, food. But I think the biggest impact that we have seen over the years is the Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras in Houma is known as the second largest Mardi Gras parade in Louisiana, and it dates back to the 1800s. So Mardi Gras is a big economic driver, but however, one of the best thing that happened in Houma, Louisiana as tourism was Alligator Annie had created the first swamp tour in Louisiana. And she was sought out by a variety of international visitors, and you know, still today her operation's been in business since 1980. So Houma was the first and only swamp tour at that time.
The 90s and 2000s saw a renaissance in oil field technologies that allowed for companies to drill in depths of water over 4,000 feet. Many of these technologies were pioneered by local business owners and leaders from Terrebonne Parish. Gulf Island Fabrication and its subsidiaries were a major employer and contributor to deep water exploration.
What I've seen mostly is a switch over from freestanding industrial properties, like somebody like Delta would buy a piece of property and they would locate wherever they wanted to, and it could be that they would locate next to some subdivision houses and whatnot, which is not really a good idea. But it's now beginning to look like, and it has for quite a number of years, started to cluster in industrial parks. I would say we were the second one in Terrebonne Parish. The first one was by the Prospect Street Bridge, and that was developed by Steve Hebert. And then we started our subdivision, and we developed about 3,000 acres. Most of that's all sold now. And then the subdivision started popping up at various places, but that has been the main change, I think, is the location in their own areas where they don't interfere with anybody else.
In 2010, an explosion occurred offshore, resulting in the death of 11 workers and injuring an additional 17. Known as the Deepwater Horizon spill, a federal moratorium on offshore drilling was enacted, and roughly 10,000 folks were temporarily unemployed. As is common in Terrebonne Parish, our citizens remained resilient, and the oil field began to recover. With the advent of technology, a record number of barrels were produced in the Gulf, which allowed the country to become a major influencer in the international supply of oil and gas.
In my industry, when I took over, we had, which was around 2000, 2007, something like that, when I took over. We had 4 hurricanes in a row, right as soon as we took over. It destroyed all of our industry altogether. We had no way of making any money. Those people down the bayou were so resilient, they came back as fast as they could. We went back into business. We faced an oil spill right after those 4 hurricanes, which pretty much devastated everything because everything was polluted, and we've overcome that.
In 2013, Levac Shipyards acquires Tidewater's Marine Quality Shipyards. 2018, Gulf Island is awarded the first of 3 regional class research vessels for Oregon State University, with the last being awarded in 2019. These vessels will be utilized to advance the science of coastal environments and support research on topics such as ocean acidification, hypoxia, and sea level rise. In a deal that enhanced the position as the largest privately owned shipbuilder in the United States, Bollender Shipyards of Lockport, Louisiana, acquires the assets of the shipyard division of Gulf Island Fabrication in the year 2021.
Going forward, And we talked a little bit about diversifying the economy. A lot of people talk about the economy. What can you do to help economic development and all? Well, in my opinion, our economics in our parish is pretty well developed. That's just my personal opinion. Pretty well developed already. The question is, how do you diversify into other industries and draw capital into our area from manufacturing company that may want to relocate and stuff? Well, when you, and I put the word tourism in there, and that was one of the things they talked a lot about in the 80s. Well, to increase tourism in your area, I think everybody knows that cosmetics means a lot. How you build stuff, you know, how consistent, you know, make things look, lack of a better word, pretty, or whatever, you know, your environment, you know, you gotta spend money there doing that if you're gonna get tourism in there, right? When you go look at a place, first thing you know is the cosmetics, or how good it looks.
So tourism in Terrebonne Parish has generated over $160 million in visitor spending. They produced $21 million in state and local taxes, $60 million in direct earnings, 2,180 direct jobs. And then if it wasn't for those state and local taxes that was collected by the hotel motel taxes and tourism, each household would have to pay $520 in additional taxes. So tourism is definitely an economic driver for Terrebonne Parish.
So certainly we've come a long ways, there's no doubt about it, but we can't underscore the fact that we have a long way to go, but we definitely have came a long ways.
And we will ensure willingness to kind of work along with some of the organizations like the NAACP and the other organizations to help, to help us continue to grow as a single community and not necessarily a separated community.
But can we keep it up? Who knows? We have to survive because the price didn't increase relative to, our cost. So our production increases has kept us in business.
I am thoroughly happy about the collaboration of leaders and partners in this community right now who's gathering together to make and improve our quality of life. Because before, just the tourism bureau, we can only do so much, but we cannot do and move forward without our partners to help and bring this community to where it needs to be. We have a great community, we have great people, we have great heritage, and I think this area is popular to come and visit, and I think people who ever come in here is unique, and they would enjoy visiting here in Louisiana, in Houma, Louisiana.
And we are facing worldwide competition in the fresh shrimp industries and the oyster industries and the fish industry and stuff like that. But we have a little niche industry here with this dried shrimp, and we're nurturing it, and we have been doing it for a long, long time. For some particular reason, this area produces probably some of the finest dried shrimp ever made in the world, and still is producing it. Although our industry has shrunken, we still have this little industry. I cannot tell you what's going to happen in the next few years with it cause our industry is going to concern. But I can guarantee you the people that are working in this industry, or whether they're here or whether they're working in our industry or whatever it is, they're very, very resilient, and they're gonna survive this hurricanes and the COVID and the new thing with the inflation and such, and they will be so resilient, and Terrebonne Parish will survive and be part of the world as we know it today.
I think it's still the good earth, and if the federal government would leave us alone, I think we'd be in great shape. I don't think that's going to happen. But I do see us continuing to be a thriving community.
You know, God willing, we get through things sometimes that we think we're gonna end up, you know, with nothing, but nothing sometimes may be plenty. So, and I'm still have a lot of hope for that industry over the next 15, 20 years or so. I think it may not be as robust, but who knows what it's going to do, right? But what we see is it's not going to be as robust as it was, but it's still going to be a vital part of Terrebonne Parish.
I think the future of Terrebonne Parish itself is, you know, there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts about going on in the future. And if you read about the oil industry and the seafood industry and the water recession and the sinking, and there's just so many issues that we have to look forward into the future. But as long as we have people living, and as long as we have people here, the medical industry is going to continue to be, I think, a very big part of Terrebonne Parish, both financially, economically, and in the life-saving endeavors that it continues to do today.
I think it's very important that everyone works together for Terrebonne Parish. Again, it means good earth, and we have good people here. And we have to make that extra effort for all our people. When one moves forward, everyone should move forward.